Welcome back to Supporting Physician Spouses. I'm Kendra.
And I'm Katie. We're so glad that you're here.
Today's episode is a very special one because we're going back to the very beginning, our beginning. We're sharing the story of how Katie and I met. And spoiler alert, it started with an email that really struck a chord.
Yep, I sent you, Kendra, a message that was basically saying, help, I'm very nervous for residency and trying to figure out how to be a good partner while also keeping a hold on myself. If you've ever felt that way, whether you're starting residency in the thick of training or a few years out, you're not alone.
We're going to read that original email out loud and talk through the themes it brings up. Things like resentment, unmet needs, and why it's so easy to lose sight of yourself when life feels like it's revolving around your partner's career.
Yeah, let's also recap some of the coaching insights that came out of that conversation and how they still apply today. We'll also wrap up with some tips for any med spouses who's anticipating a big transition.
That's a great idea. So, whether you're brand new to this life or you've been walking this road for a while, we think you'll find something here that resonates.
So grab your favorite beverage, take a deep breath, and let's dive in. Okay, I want to start by reading this email I sent to you, Kendra. This was, I think, in February of 2023. This is a few weeks before my husband matched into family medicine, and I was nervous and knew I wanted to be proactive. But I also felt that creeping fear of what might be coming. So here's the email. Hi, Kendra. My name is Katie Harris. I am married to my husband, who is a fourth year medical student. We find out where we match into family medicine residency in about a month. It is very exciting, but in preparing for residency, I want to achieve a very healthy mindset to help me navigate my husband's busy schedule, solo parenting, long days, and limited quality time. I've been thinking of life coaching in preparation for residency for a while, and I just listened to your episode on the Married to Doctors podcast and learned that you are married to a doc too. I do pretty well holding down the fort, but when I'm tired and running on empty, resentment of this arduous journey creeps in with my unmet needs. I think life coaching could help me gain tools to help me survive and maybe thrive his residency. I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you, Katie.
Ah, I remember that email. And I should give a shout out to Laura McKeldry, who was the host of the Married to Doctors podcast, for having me on. And we're sad that that podcast no longer exists. It was a fabulous resource and still is. But that line that you said there at the very end, it was like, I do pretty well holding down the fort, but when I'm tired and running on empty, resentment of this arduous journey creeps in with my unmet needs. That hit me so hard because that's the way that I have felt at times. And that is also what I hear all the time from others. And it is so common, especially at these big transition moments. We think we're prepared and then life gets real, real fast. And, we think something is wrong with us or that we're the only ones that are feeling this way. But you're not alone.
For sure. And what's funny is the end of medical school is really breezy, right? My husband was mostly done with his hard rotations. You're just kind of waiting for graduation. And then you move, and there's a month to kind of play with your family. So I knew I wanted to enjoy those moments. I wanted these tools beforehand so I could really be present in that quality time we were going to have, and then also be prepared for that kind of drop off in his support at home, at least.
Yeah, this is why I'm such a big fan of starting to work on yourself before residency begins. Ideally, this would all be something that we learn, maybe when we're in high school or in college, that we get these skills. But so many of us don't have them. And then we start medical school and we start entering the waters of survival mode. And for sure, sometime during residency, you're full on survival mode. Your brain is more open to creating some strong habits and awareness earlier in that process than it is later.
For sure. And just to add, I had a newborn who was just barely getting out of her colicky phase. And so I was like, I have this little bit of breath. It was just a hard phase of life in general. Then you add in medicine, and I knew I needed your help.
Yeah, it's so funny because sometimes I'm like, let's not call it hard. And then other times I'm like, yes, it definitely is hard. So being
Mm,
able to balance those two things, because we don't want to take on the identity of this is just, the hardest thing that I've ever done. But we also don't want to downplay the reality is that it is hard, but it can be hard and you can still be well. And so for most
Mm,
of us, we don't realize how important that inner narrative we have is until it starts to sabotage us. And so we talk a lot about resentment, for example, and yes, that is just an emotion, but more than an emotion, resentment really is a signal and it is telling you something important. It's like yelling, hey, something needs your attention. And if you don't pay attention to it, things don't typically get better on their own. They typically get worse.
yeah. I remember in our conversation, I was telling you details about how I wasn't taking care of my needs, but most people I was talking to would just kind of nod their head and be like, yeah, I understand why you're not. But you helped me pinpoint specifically because you're not taking care of that need of yours, Katie. This is why you're feeling the way you're feeling. It's not guaranteed that I have to feel that way or that lack of action has to happen.
Yeah, I think going back to that, this is really hard. Sometimes we use that as an excuse then to stop taking care of ourselves because it's hard. And we kind of create this cycle that just reinforces itself. It's hard. And so I don't take care of myself, which makes it hard. So I don't take care of myself. And it's just this vicious cycle that once you get on it, it's hard to get off because sometimes you then tie your identity to that. Like, this is who I am. I'm the person who doesn't take care of herself. My life is hard. Nothing's going the way that I want to. I'm here supporting this person doing their thing, and that's the only thing that matters. And it's really dangerous. I remember that conversation, and there were things that you had been doing prior that you had stopped doing. And so when we can identify what has changed and what were you doing that was good for you that you're no longer doing and why are you no longer doing that, that is a wake up call. It's a call to action to do something differently.
Yeah.
So I also remember from that call you were reading Gretchen Rubin's book at that time, The Four Tendencies, and you self-identified as an obliger. And obligers, that's exactly what they do. We meet others' outer expectations, but we struggle to meet our internal expectations. And I think it's really easy for women, particularly mothers, to be natural obligers. And the way that you can protect yourself from that resentment creeping in is by having strong foundational habits that can keep your cup filled faster than it's being drained. And I know that was a metaphor that we
Mm.
worked with early on in our call. Um, and another way to think of that, you can't pour from an empty cup, is that rather than trying to pour faster into your cup, just plug the leaks. And you don't have to do anything more. You don't have to do anything additional. We just have to get some of those leaks plugged so that your cup can then overflow. And then that blesses everybody who's around you.
Yeah, I felt really confused at this time because I could see maybe my inaction or my creeping away from good habits. But growing up, so much of our life is scheduled for us, right? Whether it's school or for me, it was sports too. I had a very busy schedule. And so without really framework, because I was working from home and mostly home with my children, just was finding myself almost doing less, even though I had more time. And so that was building shame, that was building guilt, and a lot of confusion. I am a go-getter. I've accomplished a lot. And yet, in this stage of life, I just couldn't get myself going. And you really helped me identify that it's because I was missing these foundational habits, which have really, really helped me.
Want to remind you of this one little thing. We were talking about specific activities and tasks or habits that have bigger impacts on your life than others. You were talking, I connect with my friends on Marco Polo, or I text my friends, or this social connection that I'm having isn't necessarily in person, but social media produces a different result than calling a friend and talking to them on the phone and being able to notice, where do I get the biggest bang for my buck in how I connect with people, especially when that life is hard or I feel that time is limited. How can I make the most of the time that I have? And everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with like doom scrolling, or you
Mhm.
just pick up your phone and you get lost in things. Would you mind sharing maybe an example?
Yeah. Well, I remember you asking how kind of my social life was, who I was connecting with. And I remember kind of feeling proud, like, oh, I have like an awesome group of girls that we live all over the country and we all Marco Polo daily, really. And you kind of push back, like, oh, like maybe that's part of this issue because it surely is connection, but it's not the real time. It's different, right? There's a different effect. And that really was the first time I'd ever thought of that. And I love these ladies. I was just able to get together with them last weekend. But I think part of the problem with Marco Polo is it's almost I'm constantly drawn away from the present. And because it's not real time, I'm not actively connecting with those friends at the same time. So part of my problem was that I wasn't connecting with the people I was with, which at this time is my children. I had the habit to get on my Marco Polo and then I say, hey, Kate, kids, I want 15 minutes by myself. And then it led to more fighting and just kind of this chaotic moment. I kind of started to make safeguards for connecting with my kids. And this was the first time in my motherhood that I realized connecting with my kids actually does fill my connection need. I just thought I always needed adults. So what I was doing at the time, it was beginning of spring season, super beautiful where I was living. I would stop at fun parks or kind of naturescapes with my children, particularly oceanside. I guess this was once I was in residency. I would just watch my children puddle in rocks, and one by one, they'd come show me what they were finding. I was watching them in their discovery. And just imagining this now, I can feel grounded. I can feel my stresses decrease and my love for them increase. So that's one example.
Awesome. I'm glad that we talked about connection because if you remember, we named some other needs in that first meeting and how, ignoring your own needs does lead to depletion and then eventually resentment. Do you remember what some of those other needs were?
Let's see. Well, I know physical activity is always a really easy one for me to identify. And what's funny is when we started this call, I mentioned that I had kind of gotten out of my habit of going to the gym. We had just been out of town and hadn't been back at this point in February. It was kind of high flu season. And so I had excuses for not going, right? My favorite time to go was the morning, and I wasn't waking up early, and I didn't want to take my kids to daycare because I didn't want them to get sick. And most women I interacted with would just nod their head and be like, yeah, I totally get that. But you were like, I don't get that. You need to be going to the gym. This is your need. And if your kids do get sick, you're going to be more equipped to take care of them because your needs have been met and you're healthy, you're feeling strong. And I was like, oh, no excuses, work with Kendra. And I was really grateful. And I started getting back to the gym. And then I remember how much I like it.
Yeah, I love that. No excuses for Kendra. I'll take that
Like,
title. But, there are core needs that pretty much everybody has. And I found it so interesting during that first meeting as we were naming them. You really did. It's like, I think all human beings, we do have these needs for sleep, for
yeah,
creativity, for exercise, and for connection. We
yeah.
all have those. And maybe we don't do them all the time perfectly, but somehow being able to incorporate these into our lives the majority of the time and to create a path forward so that you can hone in and utilize and harness the strengths that sleep, exercise, creativity, and connection give to fueling your life. It really makes handling the stresses of this life more easy to handle. And I love that example that you shared. Like, yeah, I can feel myself grounded when I do these
Mm,
things. I can feel my stress levels reduce a little bit. So at that meeting, I gave you 3 steps to do. And these are 3 steps that anybody could also do once they've identified those needs. And the first was to create a plan or a goal for each of those identified needs. And so you could even ask yourself, what am I going to choose to do to protect each of those needs? What are my goals? Like, am I shooting for 9 hours of sleep or am I shooting for 30 minutes more sleep than I got previously? Like, we can baby step our way there. For
hmm
exercise, what kind of exercise am I going to do? Where am I going to do that? So that's part of the step 2, like creating the structure or the routine around each need. Um, Identifying how do I want to do these activities? What are the activities I want to do? And then What are the actions that are going to lead to success? Kind of going back to the Marco Polo. Is spending an hour on Marco Polo going to give me the same return as spending an hour communicating on the phone in live time with a friend? And then the third step is to create some accountability. How are you going to know if this is working? And then what are the signs that you need to look for to be able to evaluate if it's working or not? And sometimes a good friend, your husband, a family member, somebody can help you with that accountability if you share what it is that you're going to do. So sometimes everyone thinks, well, maybe I just need to work with a coach, and maybe they do, but not everyone needs to, and not
Hmm,
everyone can. And so, again, there are things that you can do on your own. And then if you've tried everything you can think of and you're not getting the results that you want, then maybe it is time to work with a coach.
for sure. Yeah, looking back, I'm so grateful I reached out. I felt way more confident that I could identify my core needs. I had ideas to meet them. And I think also just talking to a med spouse who had been through it, you were really a good cheerleader. You had faith in me, even though you had just met me. And so I'm so grateful I reached out. That coaching session didn't just prep me for residency, but it's really helped me to reclaim me in my own life.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you reached out too, because now 2 years later, we've started this beautiful friendship, a partnership, and now this podcast that we hope helps other spouses feel seen and supported too.
So if you're listening and your partner is about to start residency, or you're just feeling maybe that resentment is creeping in, or you have in the past, we want you to know that, again, you're not alone, and maybe try these steps.
And we're also going to link some free resources in the show notes that we shared in Katie's first follow up email. And if coaching sounds like something that could support you, we're always happy to connect. Next time on Supporting Physician Spouses, we'll walk you through a simple self assessment to help you identify which core needs might not be getting met and what to do about it.
If this episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend who might be about to enter this season.
And we'd love to hear from you. What's one thing you wish someone had told you before residency? Tag us on Instagram or send us a message. We might even include your story in a future episode. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Supporting Physician Spouses.
Until then, we're here cheering you on.